The book of Revelation presents a unique textual paradox. John produced the most Old Testament saturated document in the biblical canon without using a single direct quotation. New Testament authors used ancient scripture as the structural architecture for their own theology. We can test this by looking at Revelation 21. If you identify and erase every Old Testament allusion in this passage, the remaining text collapses into a handful of disconnected prepositions and conjunctions. When the text reappears, it is clearly color-coded by its origin. The narrative is almost entirely assembled from the vocabularies of Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Genesis. These authors wove their theology directly from these ancient prophetic threads. We are going to reverse engineer the eschatological finale of Revelation to trace these specific threads back to their source. Identifying these intertextual links allows us to resolve the major theological debates surrounding the text. Exegesis requires this intertextual context. Without it, the author's original intent remains hidden. We begin with a specific geographical anomaly and John's vision of the New Jerusalem. In Revelation 21:1, John claims that in the new creation, the sea was no more. Modern readers often assume this is a literal forecast, suggesting the final state of the earth simply lacks physical oceans. This comparative analysis with Isaiah reveals a different intent. Isaiah describes a future salvation where God dries up the sea and pierces a creature named Rahab. This connection shows the eschatological sea and Rahab are shared symbols, representing chaos and hostility toward God's order. Throughout the ancient Near East and the biblical tradition, the sea is the home of chaotic forces that oppose the divine creator. Isaiah used the historical parting of the Red Sea as a blueprint for the future. It demonstrates how God will remove all chaotic barriers that stand between his people and their salvation. John's declaration that the sea was no more means that the evil and chaos barring God's people from their inheritance have been permanently eradicated. John then turns from geography to architecture, making a surprising claim in verse 22. He sees no temple in the city. This breaks from centuries of Jewish prophetic expectation that anticipated a massive, restored temple building. This covenant formula in verse 3, "They will be my people," aligns exactly with Ezekiel. In Ezekiel, this precedes an angel measuring a physical temple. John mirrors the sequence, but his angel measures the entire city of New Jerusalem instead of a single temple. A physical temple exists to mediate God's holy presence in a world marked by sin. Because sin has been entirely removed from the new creation, that mediation is no longer required. The entire city and its inhabitants have become the unmediated dwelling place of God, fulfilling Ezekiel's vision by transcending the need for a building. We see this confirmed in the construction materials of the city, specifically its 12 foundation stones. Isaiah 54 previously predicted a future Jerusalem built with sapphires and jewels. Ancient readers, such as the community behind the Dead Sea Scrolls, interpreted these stones metaphorically as the founding leaders of the community. John adopts this method, explicitly identifying his 12 foundation stones as the 12 apostles of the Lamb. However, John adds another layer by listing 12 specific stones not found in Isaiah's original prophecy. These stones map directly to the garments of the high priest found in the book of Exodus. John then includes gold, onyx, and a river of life. This combination of elements, gold, onyx, and a branching river, is a direct linguistic match to the description of the Garden of Eden in Genesis 2. John is fusing Aaronic priesthood imagery with the geography of Genesis. By layering these specific texts, John shows that the ultimate goal is a restored Eden where all believers function directly as priests. We can apply this methodology to the famous final warning at the end of the book. John pronounces a curse upon anyone who adds to or takes away from the words of his prophecy. Modern readers universally interpret this through a textual critical lens, imagining someone with an ink scraper physically erasing words from the page. This reading incorrectly projects modern anxieties about canon closure onto an ancient document. The phrase originates in the Mosaic Covenant. Deuteronomy 4 and 12 use these exact phrases to command the people's obedience. In Deuteronomy, adding to the law meant incorporating pagan idolatry into worship. Subtracting from it meant neglecting the covenant or refusing to obey. John's first-century audience was facing immense pressure from the Roman Empire to conform. John is warning the church not to add Roman emperor worship to their faith, nor to subtract by abandoning the covenant to avoid persecution. Identifying the Old Testament architecture reveals the definitive practical instructions John intended for his church.